Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question was suggested by a colleague. Amy has her Shapesharer become a copy of Nick's Grizzly Bears. Then she plays a clone and has it enter as a copy of Shapesharer. What are clone's characteristics once it's on the battlefield? What will clone look like after the Shapesharer's effect wears off? We'll start out by recalling an important fact about copy effects, that being that they do not copy any counters or other types of continuous effects acting on the thing that's being copied. So, for example, if Nick had a Grizzly Bears with a +1/+1 counter on it, and it had an equipment attached to it that gave it first strike, and Nick played some card that made Grizzly Bears a pirate until end of turn, and there was an enchantment out that made all of Nick's creatures black, none of that would be reflected onto the Shapesharer. Rather, when the Shapesharer becomes a copy of Grizzly Bears, it would have the characteristics of a normal Grizzly Bears, a 2/2 green bear with no abilities. The analogy I like to use for this is that when you're copying that Grizzly Bears, you take the Grizzly Bears card over to the copy machine and you hit the copy button. And then you paste whatever comes out onto the Shapesharer. With that said, there actually are a few types of continuous effects that are visible to copy effects. For completeness, I'll talk about all of them in turn. The most exotic is that effects that apply as something enters the battlefield or is turned face up and set the creature's power and toughness are also copied. So if you had a Shapesharer copy a Primal Clay, the Shapesharer would not die immediately because it's already on the battlefield and no choice was made for it. Rather, it would copy the characteristics corresponding to the choice that was made for the original Primal Clay. This is pretty niche since there's only a handful of cards that use this type of effect in the first place, but the second is a bit more common. A permanent's face-down status can also modify its copyable information, and that makes sense, right? If you copy a face-down permanent, you don't know what its actual mana cost or creature types or power and toughness are. Heck, if it's a cloaked or manifested card, its front face might not even have all those values at all. So the copyable information that the copy machine spits out is the same as what the game sees from the effect that caused the original to be face-down in the first place. In particular, cloaked and disguised permanents having Ward 2 is baked into that information, so if you copy one of those, the copy will have Ward also. There are a ton of other potential weird interactions with copying face-down permanents, and I recommend my video on face-down spells and permanents if you'd like more information. Finally, the last exception is the one that's relevant to the case presented in the original problem statement. Copy effects are able to modify a permanent's copyable information. Returning to the analogy from earlier, because you pasted the Grizzly Bears information onto the Shapesharer, when you take that card to the copy machine, you'll be copying the Grizzly Bears information, not the Shapesharers that you pasted over. Therefore, your clone will also become a 2/2 bear with no abilities. In contrast to the Shapesharer effect, which lasts only until Amy's next turn, clones lasts indefinitely. Once an object has been copied, changing the copyable values of the original will not result in any changes to the copy. So the clone will stay being a 2/2 bear even after the effect making Shapesharer a copy of Grizzly Bears ends. There's one last complication that I want to bring attention to, which is that some copy effects include modifications or exceptions to the copying process. For example, Phantasmal Image becomes a copy, except it's an illusion in addition to its other types, and it has, when this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, sacrifice it. These modifications are considered to be part of the copy effect, which means that they are visible to future copy effects. This fits into the copy machine analogy if you imagine such effects as editing whatever comes out of the copy machine with a marker before you paste it on. So if you had a Phantasmal Image that was a copy of Grizzly Bears, and then you cloned that Phantasmal Image, the clone would be an illusion bear, and if the clone was ever the target of a spell or ability, you'd have to sacrifice it. Be careful when applying that rule. Sometimes cards will be worded in such a way that it looks like it might be an exception or a modification to the copy process, but it's actually just another discrete continuous effect, which, like we said at the very beginning of this video, would not be visible to future copy effects. Anything that uses the word except will change the copyable information. If you don't see that word, you're dealing with a non-copyable extra continuous effect. If you'd like more practice with this concept, I discussed this issue in depth in my video on how Joffrey interacts with Divine Visitation. And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.